Hello and welcome back to Cinema 104, Film History. So now we're at the end of Unit 2. We're talking about the late 70s, and things really change again with the introduction of blockbusters. Now, the very first one is The Godfather in 72, really more of a new Hollywood type film, but I grouped it with the blockbusters because it really changed filmmaking. It has a very successful sequel, which also won the Oscar. It won the Oscar. It broke records for attendance and became, sort of an all-time great American film. And it showed that sequels and these sort of bigger budget, epic type films can still succeed, especially when they have these sort of dark undertones and filming. And then also times with the 70s crime investigations that were going on at the time, looking into the mafia in New York in particular. Then later on, we see Jaws and Star Wars are introduced. And these films bring in special effects, likable protagonists. They're very non-political, and they have a lot of fantasy and escapism. And they came in around 66, 67. So this really kind of marks the end of the new Hollywood period because these films come along, they're not political, they're not dark. They have heroes you can cheer for, and people often do. Rocky, who we'll look at in week 8, is another example of a likable protagonist who wins in the end. And people are just sort of over the heavy political period. Vietnam has ended. The draft has ended. Nixon was thrown out of, or resigned rather. Um, so some of the issues of the 70s have subsided. Carter, a liberal Democrat, was elected. And so the late 70s are much more relaxed. We see a flourishing of culture. People, the baby boomers are kind of fully of age now. Some of them are turning 30 and so forth. And they want to party. They want to have a good time. And so we see the emergence of disco, which is another big blockbuster in the era, and the proliferation of a more hedonistic lifestyle, the use of marijuana and cocaine and so forth. So we see all these forces, and all these films are blockbusters. They have a huge cultural impact. Filmmaking is never quite the same after Jaws and Star Wars. It brings in a lot of the type of films that we see now. I mean, they're the superhero films that you might enjoy are inheritors to these blockbuster films that were made with lots of special effects, a larger budget. Now, these initial blockbusters were not huge budgets, but their sequels were. And that was the other thing, is now they had a franchise. They had something that could be sold over and over again. You could make multiple versions of the story and make a lot more money. And then let's not forget merchandising, particularly for Star Wars. There was a lot of merchandising that came out that contributed heavily to the profit. So we see a lot of revolutions in filmmaking, merchandising, promotion, summer nationwide release. All these things are sort of created by the blockbuster of the 70s, and they were now today they're just what's done. It's just sort of accepted policy. So in some ways we're still in the blockbuster phase. And well, the films that we're talking about here, you see the ones that I have behind me: The Godfather, Apocalypse Now, Rocky. There were other ones like Superman, the very first superhero film that was successful. Jaws. Here we see Cuckoo's Nest from last week. But there are many, many films of this type of genre. Later we get into the 80s, we'll see Indiana Jones, Top Gun, these films that were very popular at this time and were huge, huge influences financially in Hollywood and also culturally. People went back to see them multiple times. They became discussed. You had to see all of these films. They were just very culturally of the moment. Okay, so that ends Unit 2. We have a quiz coming up next week. You also have just one more film with a few clips to watch, which is Rocky, which goes further into the importance of that film. And then after that, we have spring break. Okay, so you get a little break. No homework due over spring break, but there is an extra credit assignment in there. And then we begin Unit 3, which will be the 80s and the 90s. Yes, will be very fun. We'll be looking at the Generation X era. All right. Hope you enjoyed the class so far. We're at the halfway point, so reach out if you have any questions, and I look forward to seeing you in the second half.